Well, this is not the second time we've done this because we did it a couple times ahead of time. This is the second time we've recorded it. That was a pleasure.
It was absolutely fantastic.
No surprise, Amy. So we talked before about improv, and you and I love music, and we have at least a passing knowledge of music. I don't know anybody who rightfully can claim, well, I know music. No, you don't. Music may know you. So tell me about the improv thing, and we've kind of had this kind of conversation before, but I felt like we went, yeah, and then we ran out of time.
Yeah, music improvisation is so fascinating because it's taking the fundamentals, and you have the classical structure of classical music, you know, what to do, what you can't do within the classical musical education. But then improvisation takes that foundation and builds upon it in a way that following music sheet or standard, procedure wouldn't necessarily create. And the improvisation, the beauty of it is really the divergence from the standard structure. Like I can take a classic pop song, for example, like Perfect by Ed Sheeran or All of Me by John Legend. But if I just play in that, I keep on playing it, play on with the existing song, I can only grow so much. I'm restricted by, the original artist, what they've done, what they've written, what they've created, but I don't necessarily have the opportunity to grow, to really explore and to kind of push the boundary of what my possibilities are and expand. And so improvisation is really this kind of a really small kind of experimental state of being where you take what's known and you kind of see what might combine, what might not combine, and then you just mess around. And improvisation is beautiful because most of the times, in a session of practicing with improv results in discoveries that aren't normally found if I were to play the same song, again and again and again and again. And improvisation is that beauty where imagination really takes hold. And what we just heard, with Mac and I, we were just improvising. I mean, that was literally the beauty of improvisation in that we were kind of experimenting, exploring what could be done, but also at the same time, my methodology for improv is finding song snippets, like melody segments from pieces that I like, pop, rock, hip hop, whatever. Small segments, 4 or 5 note snippets, but knowing what they are, what they sound like, it may be in the form of a favorite lyric or whatnot, but knowing what they are, so that when I go into an improv session, I can just kind of be a master uh, sewing in a way, sew them together, stitch them up, and kind of combine snippets from each element from songs I like, and as a result, create something that uh, most likely has never existed before.
It's like turning the radio tuner dial on your radio, right? While you're driving, so you get bits and pieces. And our conversations helped me to clarify something for me that has always been there, but I didn't know. I mean, I've played in orchestras and stuff, where what's important is that you play exactly what's on the sheet music. There's no room for improv unless the conductor says, take it, which doesn't happen much. But, you know, I played for a living for a good, a substantial part of my life. And I had a small following in the Washington area. And I never played the same song twice. I played music that that moved me and grabbed me in the moment, not necessarily what the audience expected me to play, you know. And I know a lot of people when they play, they try to get as close to the original as possible. So they want to sound like the Beatles or Eric Clapton or Bon Jovi or Beethoven or whomever. But I never felt that magnet of replication. I always felt magnetized by exploration and by discovery. And you helped me to kind of codify that and help me understand what what about playing music is most important to me.
Yeah, I mean, imitation has its merits. It certainly helped me. I started out in middle school band, the playing along with the sheet music, all the popular songs and such. But certainly that imitation really, understand what already works, in the course of human progress, since music, cavemen were sitting around fires, making music with the most rudimentary tools until you have the invention of the saxophone, the piano, the violin, and such. But really, imitation, I think, is fascinating in terms of create knowing, what has worked and what has methodology, what kind of methodology has proven, popular or even, appealing to the ear. Because, you had, hand a saxophone or an instrument like a guitar to like a random person with zero musical knowledge, most likely their improvisation will not sound the most pleasant or soothing to the ear. So, so, so the imitation really kind of builds that foundation, knowing what kind of works, because even though improvisation is experimentation, like you said, is exploring, breaking beyond the boundaries of what is known, what is possible, what creates that understanding of what are the puzzle pieces, so that you can perhaps put together a new puzzle versus what has already been done again and again and again.
Well, and using the jigsaw puzzle as a metaphor, and we have one right here, which we haven't done yet.
Oh man, that's my favorite. The wave, like the Japanese wave art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and when I was a kid, my family always had a jigsaw puzzle on a card table in the living room, especially when we moved to the beach. I mean, that was just a ritual. And what using that as a metaphor for me, improv. Not only do you put the puzzle together, but you make the pieces.
Right.
So there's for me there's like an additional level of complexity. There's an additional excitement, and there's an additional risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're definitely creating new pieces, and as you go, that's a huge part of improv. Sometimes even like the most well-known musicians, artists, or whatnot would will improvise every now and then, because that's part of the brainstorming, but in the musical sense of creating new songs, things that might become an album or top the charts. And I think it's really fascinating how that foundation really enables many like the popular artists, ones that are built 1 billion plus streams on Spotify or YouTube, whatever platform you will, have somewhat of a musical education in one sense or the other. They've kind of looked at other artists or artists in decades past, but have understood what is that foundation, so that they can explore and expand beyond that. And what you noticed with what I played in with Mac was that what I did with our kind of performance, if you will, was I kind of followed the standard structure of a pop song. Like there's a melody, the chorus, and then
Mhm.
a melody and the chorus. There would be a part of it where I played the same tune, again, again, kind of following the pop uh format, the standard, like foundational knowledge, and then just taking that format and really expanding and seeing, what could work, what doesn't, and that is really part of the creative element, and being truly creative and combining things and drawing connections in ways that normally wouldn't have been possible.
And when I was playing with my band in Washington, we did all original music. We did mostly like all but like two songs I wrote. And for me, the writing process started with improv. Is to sit down and just let my fingers do the walking like the old Yellow Pages ad. And I didn't, part of what's cool about that process for me, what's very cool, is I'm pretty thoughtless. I'm not mindless. I'm very mindful, but I'm not going, oh, I bet a F sharp would work here, or I need to do some triplets right now. It's just letting it, and then out of that thing, that sort of amorphous process, all of a sudden it'll be like, oh, it's starting to like, it's like rather than a skeleton building out, it's coming from outside and creating the skeleton. And that's very exciting for me.
Yeah, absolutely. That metamorphosis, that state of flow. Like a lot of times when I'm improvising, I'm not really thinking about, where should I play this note after that note, this sequence of notes. It just happens because that foundation is already ingrained. Like I know where the keys are, what each note sounds like, but it's more so of putting the pieces together, creating something, and experiment, being willing to experiment because that's where the creativity element is so fascinating. I know you mentioned you did a performance and I had the opportunity about 2 or so weeks ago to bring my alto saxophone into an inpatient involuntary mental health facility, and I was able to, as part of their expressive arts program, perform on my saxophone as a peer, as someone who's had a mental health diagnosis, but also has gone to a point in my recovery where I'm able to be involved in various volunteer leadership roles. And in that performance, like everything that I did was improv. I mean, it was literally just me playing an upbeat rhythm melody with the patients,
Yeah.
and they were clapping along. And I did, they'd ask me for, which is a classical uh, thing that happens like when you perform something like, hey, can you play, song requests? They're like, can you play this? Or can you play that? And I'm like, no, I'm just, everything I do is really improvisation. But I was able to play from memory the song Hallelujah by uh, Leonard Cohen as sung by the
Yep.
Homophonics, and I was able to play it. That was one of the few songs that I've committed to memory because of what the song means to me. But most of the times with performances or even open mic events, it's mainly improv because music is such a powerful expression of self that sometimes I write a lot, poetry or essays or articles and such, but poetry can only capture so much because it's words on paper. And then kind of what I do with open mic events is I'll share a poetry piece that I've written, but then I'll also after that I'll say I'll play a piece on my saxophone that I'll say like is inspired by that poem because the words can only capture so much in that poetry. The rest, all those gaps that the words can't fill, is filled with the music. So definitely a very expressive form of art and also wellness.
I, I, I'm glad that you chose Leonard Cohen because the Back to Different podcast, which this is going to be part of, um, I quote Leonard Cohen, who said, "There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." And what you were talking about poetry, I mean, I like to write, and I write as part of my living, and I write some poetry. And language for me is meant to be heard. So when I write even an essay or an article, the last thing I do before I send it off is I hear it. I print it and I walk around my living room or out back or wherever and I read it aloud. And if it doesn't create music for me, right? If it doesn't create that dimension, then I go back and work on it again. Because if it doesn't sing, if there's not a cadence and spaces and all those kinds of things, then I'm not going to send it out there because it's just like, that's part of who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, music isn't, restricted to in and of itself. Me and my saxophone, kind of the idea, the principles of music with improvisation, melody, rhythm and such kind of flows like all through the other aspects and almost all aspects of my life. For a while when I was writing poetry and I was performing in open mics, people would tell me that like the way that I write with the poetry has a very musical rhythm to it. Like they
Yeah.
use it like a kid has a beat in the way that certain words like t or like p k like those words create a kind of a beat that happens as I'm writing, but not necessarily. I'm not necessarily, oh, this word should go here because it creates that sound. And then as I'm reading it, it has a consistent kind of staccato rhythm or such. I'm literally just writing as the concept, flows. but the rhythm happens because of that music and how it
There it is.
intersects directly into almost every other aspect of life.
Well, I didn't ask you before because I don't think our conversation went as fully in this direction, but I would love to read some of your poetry. And I'm not going to make you send it because I know that that's really dropping your shields just to send your poetry. Um, we talked a couple times, and we've touched on it here about this sort of maybe not quite curative properties, but the healthful properties for performing music and for playing music and for being music for crap we have in our lives. I mean, everybody has suffering, and I know you and I both have had some issues and had some stuff to deal with in our lives. And I think in our second conversation, we talked about that some. So,
Yeah.
yeah, go take it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, I've been playing the alto saxophone since I was in middle school. Middle school band, and then for a little while in high school, I had a private tutor, and then I was like kind of on and off throughout college. Picked it back up again because of the pandemic, and for a while, every time I played the saxophone, whether it's following sheet music or just improvising, I'd feel incredibly calm and like relaxed after a practice session, whether it's like 10 minutes or 30 minutes or even an hour. And I didn't know, why. Part of it is the music, right? The music is incredibly soothing, engages many different parts of the brain, but also the fact that in playing the saxophone, because it's a woodwind instrument, and then I have to use my, breath, lungs, diaphragm, that every time I was playing, I was doing what's known in the wellness sector as diaphragmic breathing. And so part of that, diaphragm breathing engages, all of the major organs in a way through the diaphragm as the breath, is created and has long sustaining notes and strong quality of musical note. And I didn't know that I was doing diaphragm breathing. I was just like, oh, I'm playing saxophone and I'm feeling great after. It must be the music. And then I took a class through the NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illnesses of Palm Beach County, and one of the classes was like, hey, one of the resilience strategies is called diaphragm breathing. This is what it is. You're breathing, deep breaths from the diaphragm. And then I was like, wait a second. I've been doing this for like 10 plus years. And I never knew that I was doing diaphragm breathing, getting those long sustained notes, playing for a long period of time without needing to take breath after breath after breath. And so, that was like pretty fascinating that I was actually, doing a wellness tactic that I didn't even know of until I was like educated about that.
And perhaps, and I think it's probably demonstrable, is that there is a really strong physiological side to creating, especially acoustic music. I mean, I've got a killer electric guitar, and it's fun to turn it up to 11 and like break some people's windows and stuff with just with sound. But for me, part of why I love the acoustic guitar, and as you know, I play saxophone too, and I also sing, which is all about breathing, right? Or a lot about breathing, is the body, my chi, my center. That's where the major sound of the acoustic guitar lives, right there, right over my center. And part of what helps me get to that place where it's like just it's like weightlessness sort of, is that vibration. And especially with an acoustic instrument, I mean, I know how the reed feels as it does its
As it
reed thing.
oscillates, yeah.
Yeah. And all that stuff is probably part of what contributes to it. And in the friendship bench, and that just happened more or less, you had also talked about the neuroscience of music, and I don't want to miss that.
Yeah, so music, how it's interpreted in the brain kind of engages, more than one sector. You have your prefrontal lobe, you have your the parts in the center, the medulla, that create, the emotional aspects of interpreting life, interpreting experiences. But music really engages like all aspects of the brain. and it really kind of helps bridge connections in a way that wouldn't necessarily be done in other aspects through the standard science, physics, chemistry, studying math, such like that, engineering. But music really kind of ties in those factors together so that you have uh, brain circuitry that's more interwoven and also communicates more directly with each other. And I think part of the brilliant aspect in how kind of creativity tie with music ties into flourishing in other aspects in the sciences, engineering and such, is because that music facilitates the connections, and then the connections are used in actual practice within the science STEM or whatever context. And so there's a classic. Not many people know this, but Einstein actually played the violin, and he improvised on the violin for uh, quite a while. No one really knows that. Everyone knows him for space-time relativity, E equals mc squared. But he, for a long time played the violin, and he had standard classical education. But when he was stuck in his scientific inquiries and his research or whatever, anytime he'd pick up the violin, improvise for a bit, and then reportedly has said that afterwards felt that he would solve his problems a little bit faster, and was able to reach certain solutions. And I think it's a classic thing, one of many examples throughout history. But music is really a facilitator in and of itself. Does have fascinating calming and meditative properties, but also creates those connections in mind so that in later on, the effect isn't really immediate, right? I play the saxophone, I don't immediately get like a aha moment, eureka, you know, light bulb. But what occurs after, maybe days, weeks after, maybe even months after, when I'm able to kind of, because I've done the music, because I've allowed my brain to explore the musical possibilities, then it sets up the first domino for a series that eventually result in what I'm able to work on in my projects to actually get like an aha moment or a realization that can kind of progress that further.
I think what I'm hearing, and it makes perfect intuitive sense to me as well as experiential sense, is that there are these shorter term sort of immediate effects of playing because of our breathing and because of our attention and because our brain gets into this really nice flow place where it's like being exercised, massaged, and exploring all at the same time, and that there is a long-term resonance of that experience, which maybe opens us up to a more connective frame of mind between ideas, between things which connections which we might be aware of, but but not be able to like go, oh, I get that now. And that maybe creating music, not just listening to music, although that's probably not a bad thing at all, but creating music and having the music be part of who you are at that moment, um, like shapes our intuition and our thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Like music, there's two very popular tenets of wellness, like what are called coping mechanisms. But I don't know, like it's like it implies you're just, you're just surviving. I like because the word coping. I like the term like resiliency strategies, and two of the most popular ones that are often promoted or even encouraged are meditation and mindfulness, right? Mindfulness and both meditation and mindfulness play heavily into improvisation because if I don't know what I'm playing, I'm not mindful of what I'm currently playing. I don't really know what I'll be able to play next, like to continue the improv string. Otherwise, it's the absolute chaos musical, package. So in being mindful when I'm playing, I know what I'm playing right now and what I should be playing in the immediate future, so that I can create a nice, smooth, exciting kind of continuation of music. And so that element, and then also the meditative aspect, either in just going with a state of flow, playing, listening as I'm playing, and playing as I'm listening, both of them, tie heavily into wellness. It's kind of a two for one combo, maybe even more of being well, because it combines all those different elements together and kind of creates that synergy of innovation and also being well and staying well.
in the um, in the improv time, which has a beginning and an end, at least for that piece of music. Um, if we, I think, and I think we do share that sort of love of that, which means it doesn't begin and it doesn't end. It just has. I mean, this is a sort of improvisational episode, but it's part of living an improv life. It's right. It isn't just a thing which is periodic. Um, for you, is there, every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's called the arc of the story, right? Um,
Yeah, right.
for our time improvising, half an hour ago or so, um, because we started and then we went and then we ended. What what like, if you can, I'm putting you on the spot, but you
Yeah,
asked.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I think, I'm always playing the saxophone. And just some breaks are longer than others. Some maybe a 1 week break, but I'm always playing the saxophone. And so, I don't really think, there certainly is a beginning in the first day that I've ever picked up the saxophone, but
Right.
I don't really think there's an end. It's a continual process. I think, my ability to play the saxophone now versus when I was in, high school, even middle school, has greatly improved, but continues to improve as I learn more, challenge myself to try different things musically as well as outside of that, and therefore continue to grow. So I think, the end will really only be, the day I take my last breath. I think every moment in between then and now, and then the unforeseeable and unforeseeable future, I'm always feeling my assessment, because although I may not physically be playing the music, the mind and its subconscious, which is still, highly being researched and not as well understood, but is still kind of processing that information, even though I may not be consciously doing or acting on that particular musical idea.
In the in the session I'm going to do in March for Dennis, um, I tried to allay people's fears about performing music, because a lot of people are like, "You can't make me sing," um, because we do sing. When we talk, we sing. When we talk to our cat, we use a different song than when we talk to our boss. Some of us. Um, when when we walk, we engage in rhythm. When we go outside and there's wind in the trees and all those things are going, that's all for me. That's all part of music. And I grew up in a musical family, and I'm very grateful for that. Whatever else my family did or didn't do for me, um, it was kind of, like Thanksgiving. You use a turkey baster when you make turkey. It's this like giant syringe that you put stuff.
Yeah.
I got like turkey music basted when I was a kid, for which I'm very grateful, because music um, is is just like you said. When you take your last breath, I imagine it'll be a diaphragmatic breath.
That's a good one. I think you definitely everyone has rhythm. Some people be like, I can't really keep a beat. I can't clap, but everyone has rhythm because when you're talking, right? Like you said, when you're saying sentences or even just communicating your idea, that in of itself has a rhythm because it has a steady kind of structure. You're communicating what you're thinking, but also in a way that someone else can hear it and understand what you're saying. I think, the language of, the English language, uh, is very similar to the language of music because you're kind of communicating music in of itself. Doesn't necessarily tell you how to design a bridge or build a build a canal or whatever, but you're communicating, emotions at the most basic, foundation level within this in the parasymetric paras the nervous system.
Sympathetic,
Yeah, the nervous system. It's
right?
within the most
Right.
basic biological, foundation, and the music is really what enables you to experience life at the fullest because every music like every movie, like TV shows or whatever, the scenes are only overly dramatic or as intense or not as intense sympathetic or not, or action based because of the movie soundtrack. The soundtrack kind of guides because I'm not only seeing, but I'm also hearing and therefore believing in whatever story that's being told. And I think that definitely ties in terms of music because you can have different forms of music, but how that music is used to convey emotion, also to communicate an emotion. Because I can say a speech, about how sorrowful I feel or how happy I am, but the music will really, hit it home. Will tell them, this is exactly what I mean in terms of what I feel.
And maybe not so much now because I've worked as an actor and I see people in TV shows and movies now who are clearly reading from a teleprompter. I mean, especially we do these really short scenes where like one person says, "Hi, Harry," and then it cuts to another guy who goes, "Hey, it's me." But really good actors like Tom Hanks or somebody like that use their voice as an instrument, not just a script.
Yeah, absolutely. You can have, yeah, the voice speaking is music in a way because to say a foreign listener, somebody who doesn't understand that native language, they're hearing sounds and sounds some ways if delivered correctly with the right kind of method of inflections on the voice and such, sounds a bit like music. Like if I have no idea what French, I don't know any French, but if I hear someone speaking French, it sounds a little bit like music to me because of the way the words and the sentences are flow and how they're combined to communicate an idea. But for me, I have no idea what the person is saying, but it sounds ooh so good.
Well, and the music of French is very different from, say, the music of German. Very different
Yeah,
kind
and that
of music,
yeah that
right?
that ties definitely into spoken word, in communicating, poetry and such. But you had mentioned poetry. I had to pull up the poem that I actually have that I wanted to share. It's a short poem, it's like 2 minutes, but I did want to share it because I think kind of ties great directly into our discussion of how words are music in a way. So if you don't mind, I'll share
No,
it.
that'll be our perfect wrap up.
Okay, absolutely. All right, so here's a poem. I wrote it and then I edited and then I wrote and I edited it. So it's always growing. But here's what I have. I haven't had it memorized, so I'm reading it. All audacious ambitions that creativity trespass, all my talents that entrance to outspin a compass, all heroic honed hobbies entertain elites access. As such, so many, I can confess, be blessed, digress. As such, I call forth complexities to dreams intense. My gallant talents champion, colorful cosmos immense. Folding origami to give birth to vase, stem, and rose. Proclaim procreation from paper to elegant proper prose. Profess precious profoundness as each crease proposed. Proper pondings on prophetic, paper elements imposed. Painting styles as modern, contemporary, and abstract. Every stroke of the brush leaves much less to subtract. Effusive designs before last bell, final call, closing act. Imaginative innovations brushed into canvas, ceiling packed. Improvising alto sax melodies, symphonies, and melodies. Monumental musical movements to mesmerize complexities. Compose expeditions from note staffs and visionaries. Challenge Beethoven movements from auditory intricacies. Designing home decor, rich, enriched, entrenched. Lavish, elusive, illuminated, visual ideologies drenched. Measured masquerade, masks, gloves, and ways to fade. Magnificent, elegant, evident for lovely life, well made. As thus effusive entities, intense talents endowments, all expansive elements emphasize a man of empowerment. I express diversions to birth, thus beauty's bravery eminent. That's my poem.
Wow. We started with a song and we ended with a song. Thank you, Davy.
Yeah, absolutely. I love chatting with you, and I hope we can do some more music together in the future.
You haven't seen the last of me.
I hope so.
Well, eat to excess on Thursday
Certainly.
and have fun. I will see you on the bench, and I will be back in touch once the smoke clears from the Thanksgiving insanity.
Yeah, and let me know where and how you want to do the podcast posting, whatever on
I
the
will.
website and such.
You'll be the second to know. I'm the first because it's my podcast, but
Yeah.
you'll be the second to know.
Yeah, and if you like for me to send you the poem itself to
I
include
would.
within, okay, I'll do
I
that.
would. All right, my friend.
All right. Have
Take
a
good
good
care of
one.
yourself,
Yeah.
right? All
Yeah,
right,
have a
later
we'll
on.
see you Thursday.
Yeah, bye.